All right, everyone, thanks for joining us today. We're really excited that so many people are interested in learning more about corporate PPAs. I'm Lachlan Jacobson from the Flow Power Business Development team, and today we're going to be looking at renewable energy from a more analytical perspective. First off, some housekeeping. We're aiming for the session to run for 45 minutes, half an hour for the presentation, and then 15 minutes for discussion and questions. If you have any questions, please hold on to them and we'll answer them at the end. And we'll also send out a recording at the end of the webinar and make it available to view on YouTube as well. With me today, I have Sarah from Flow Power's investment team.
Hi, everyone.
And Ernesto, who will imminently be graduating from the University of Melbourne's Master of Energy Systems degree.
Yes, hi, everyone.
Just quickly on the degree, the MES equips students with the tools to analyse energy systems from a technical, commercial and policy standpoint. Flow Power is an industry partner to the degree, providing opportunities for students like Ernesto to apply their skills to real-world commercial challenges. We're really proud of the work that he's done and pleased to present it to a wider audience to further understanding of the renewable energy opportunity in Australia. So today we're going to cover off an overview of power purchase agreements, how they can be used to create a natural hedge. Ernesto is going to talk through his research, and then we're going to cover off a worked example on how it can be put into practice before going to your questions. And just very briefly, a little bit about who Flow Power is. We're a licensed wholesale electricity retailer, and we specialise in solutions for commercial, industrial and government clients. We help customers develop a tailored energy strategy using a combination of demand response, renewable energy and dynamic hedging strategy. We strongly believe that engaging more energy users with the market is going to make it more efficient and deliver better outcomes for the market as a whole. So I'm going to hand over to Sarah, who's going to talk to you about power purchase agreements in more detail.
Thank you, Lachlan. The energy market is changing, and there are a number of factors that create a push for customers to explore renewable options, in particular, power purchase agreements. Let's take a look at some of the drivers behind this shift. So why now? What makes today's market the right time to explore renewables as part of your energy procurement strategy? With a number of large coal generators coming offline and an increased reliance on gas, we are experiencing high prices and volatility in the wholesale energy market. We experienced the impact of this when Hazelwood left the grid, resulting in a 200 to 300% increase in wholesale prices. As a result of this rise in wholesale prices, we then also see fixed price contracts increase significantly. So as a business with high prices everywhere, where can you seek relief? The answer is renewable energy. Renewable technology advancements have given rise to a significant reduction in costs and an increase in yield from wind and solar projects. This, coupled with Australia's excellent solar and wind resources, all support a strong economic environment for renewable energy investment, which leads to the question, how can we receive the benefit of these resources? Most of us are familiar with on-site solar and the ability to have solar panels installed on the roof of our residential addresses. This works the same for business, but on a larger scale. The pure size of a wind turbine and availability of wind resources make on-site wind rarely viable. On-site solar can be a great way to offset energy costs and reduce exposure to market prices, but can rarely provide the cover that the business needs for its entire load, which leads us to financial power purchase agreements, or corporate PPAs. A financial PPA is a direct agreement with the wind or solar generators. These are typically only available to customers with very large load. These agreements allow businesses to contract low energy prices for long periods of time, usually 10 years plus, without any capital investment. Negotiating these contracts is a long, tedious and expensive process, which require a lot of industry knowledge. Flow Power offer an extension to a financial PPA in the form of a virtual generation agreement that is seamlessly integrated into a customer's retail agreement. VGAs allow customers of varying load requirements to take advantage of low energy prices from renewable energy sources, the ability to size their VGA to the size of their load, the added hedge of blending a hybrid of wind and solar, and where a customer has on-site solar, current generation can be complemented by adding additional solar or blending with wind. All of this appears on the one simplified invoice. In 2017, Flow Power launched its virtual generation product and have since sourced offtake from both wind and solar projects in all mainland states around the NEM. We have now contracted with 10 renewable generators and are passing the benefits of low-cost energy onto our customers. Recently, we announced that the businesses that signed onto these deals saved $15.4 million collectively since their contracts began at the start of 2018. Every day we are receiving more and more interest in our VGA products from businesses of all sizes. Each business that we speak to has a different level of understanding, and a number of questions relating to contract renewables are arising. As PPAs and VGAs become more prevalent and the appetite for renewable energy increases, customers have questions, and we seek to provide comfort around those questions today. Some of the common customer questions that we receive are, what happens when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine? Why should I contract a PPA through a retailer? How does this compare to a fixed price contract? And what are the benefits of using a combination of wind and solar? The research we have completed will answer these questions and queries in the following slides.
Thanks for that, Sarah. So now I just want to talk a bit more about the mechanics of our VGA products and how they can be used to create a natural hedge. And now, first off, just with a bit of a definition to what we mean by natural hedge, it's essentially a business term where you're talking about managing your exposure to a risk by creating an exposure to the same risk but from the opposite side. So simplistically, it could be a business that manufactures milk powder, investing in a farm upstream. Then you're replacing your exposure to a commodity price with the cost of owning something else that can create the same input for you. And renewable energy is a great way to do that in a fairly straightforward way, because contracting renewable energy means that you're simply signing a contract to buy the energy that is produced by a farm, and that can be done in a way that aligns with the way that you're using energy as a business. So one way that we like to visualize these different positions for businesses is to look at average daily generation and load profiles and compare that to market prices. And what we have here on this slide is one that looks at the position if you were to contract renewable energy as a standalone financial PPA, and comparing that to a customer who may be buying the energy from the same wholesale market. So firstly, looking at the financial PPA, we have a solar generation profile, which is represented by the orange line. And in the background, you have the average wholesale price, which changes every half an hour. So if you were to make the decision to contract energy in this way, you are essentially trying to take a view on what is the wholesale price going to be during the periods that solar is generating for the next 10 years. Obviously, that's a fairly challenging exercise to work through. And as a contractor, you don't have any control over what that solar production profile is actually going to look like. You just understand it up front. And essentially what that means is that your cash flows as a business will be whatever the average wholesale price is when your solar farm is generating, less the fixed price that you've agreed to contract renewable energy for. Conversely, and essentially the opposite side of that same position, is a customer who could decide to buy their energy directly from the wholesale market. And in a similar fashion, their actual price from month to month is going to be driven by whatever their average wholesale price is during the times that they're actually using electricity. Again, it comes down to forming a view of what those wholesale prices will look like, but you could actually mount a reasonable argument that that's less risky than signing a financial PPA in isolation, because as a consumer of energy, you can contract for much shorter periods of time, and you also have a degree of control over when you use power. Obviously, demand response is a way that customers, including a lot of Flow Power customers, help to manage that exposure and improve their average wholesale outcome. But I guess the key point is that either of these positions in isolation leave you 100% exposed to the variation of the spot market. What our VGA product allows you to do is to combine those two positions and use a blend of wind and solar energy to achieve the best match for your load profile. And what that means is that where generation and demand are matched, you no longer have an exposure to the wholesale market because those equal and opposite exposures cancel each other out. So looking at this chart here, where we've combined a wind and solar profile to a combined orange line, which is essentially the wind plus solar shape, and the same load profile in the background. So the area that's below both the orange and the black line is the matched area. And for this business, electricity costs will be the strike price for renewable energy. They still have a residual exposure to the market. And one way we like to think about this is that you're essentially using the grid as a battery. So when your renewables are generating more energy than you use, you're essentially just selling it and receiving the market price. And similarly, in the evening periods, if you're using more energy than your renewables are generating, you simply import it from the market. So there is a residual market exposure, but over the course of the year, based on expected generation, you're going to be selling the same amount into the market that you are importing. All of these flows actually happen in the background and they're managed by us, and it becomes a real thing for the business when they receive their invoice on a monthly basis. So this leads us into the research and the desire to actually help create a tool that can help customers understand how these separate variables can influence a financial outcome. It's quite normal to use simulation tools to model a financial PPA position to try and understand what market variation combined with renewable variation will do in terms of driving those monthly cash flows. But we wanted to create a tool that took an extra step and investigated what it would mean for a customer who also had a load that was buying energy from the same market. A couple of things to keep in mind just about how we've set up the analysis that we're going to present today is that we are looking at energy only analysis. So there's no generation certificates that are included, and we're excluding any network or other environmental charges as well, just to simplify things. We're also looking at customers that are pursuing a 100% renewable energy contracting strategy, which is increasing in popularity, but it's certainly not the only way to go. And we've also excluded retail margins from this analysis as well. And coming back to the points I raised before, the key project aims were to essentially test the effectiveness of renewables as a natural hedge, to help our customers understand the impact of volume risk, and specifically volume risk as in how renewable production can be different over longer periods, like from year to year. And also to demonstrate the benefits of combining wind and solar contracting for a specific customer. And now I'd like to hand over to Ernesto.
Yeah, thanks, Loki. I will now give a brief overview of the stochastic model used on the research. We developed a Monte Carlo simulation that revolves around 3 random variables: solar generation, wind generation, and market prices. The model evaluates hundreds of possible and probable combinations of our 3 main variables, which can change the PGA performance over a year. In this way, we can know the expected average price per megawatt hour of the year, but we can also know the standard deviation of the results and their distribution. Knowing the variability of the PGA outcome is important because it gives customers a comprehensive way to evaluate the risk of such PGA. The 3 main submodels will be discussed next. First, the solar model. The model uses the P50 interval data of the solar farms with whom Flow Power has an offtake agreement. It also uses BOM solar irradiance data, which is publicly available online. When looking at the results of the model, the expected value of the simulation is the same as the P50 generation, which by definition is the expected value of the solar farm production. Additionally, as can be seen on the graph, the seasonality of the solar farm generation is properly followed, with higher output on the summer months. The daily pattern of solar generation is also considered, as well as the season in which the day is happening, for example, in summer, days being longer than winter days. Lastly, the variability between years is also achieved and can be seen in the P75 value of the model and the engineering year study P75. Therefore, the model creates the appropriate randomness of solar generation, which is essential for the Monte Carlo. Similarly, the wind model uses information from the engineering yield study of the wind farms. Firstly, the P50-year data determines the daily and seasonal behaviors. And secondly, the wind index, also part of the yield studies, gives the year-to-year variability. The model uses these data statistics to generate a random year of wind output with a 30-minute resolution. The worked example shows that the P50 and the mean values are almost the same. At the same time, the model has an accurate daily and seasonal variability. The yearly variation is also considered as shown on the table's P75 generation. The market prices are very volatile and with peak prices occurring occasionally, mostly in summer. But if we take out these peaks, prices follow a seasonal trend. Prices commonly low during the night and start picking up in the early morning, with the highest demand late in the afternoon when people come back from the work. The model uses historical regional reference prices from the state that is being evaluated. It uses prices from the last 5 years and divides the data using different criteria. For example, the month, if it's a weekday or a weekend, and which half hour is being evaluated. The market model is divided in two: a price diffusive model that randomizes the non-peak prices, and a secondary model that, based on price duration curves, generate the peaks. The graph shows 2018 prices overlaid with 3 random years. We can see that the peak prices occur randomly, and if we zoom in into the details, we can see that the random years follow the same trend as the 2018 year, but also have their own randomness and volatility, always in line with historical data. In Q3, the market prices follow a different pattern than in Q1, but the model considered this as well, as can be seen in the graph. This is a bespoke model that gives the Monte Carlo the required randomness to evaluate the VGA outcomes, and it does so by accurately following historical data statistics. When we put the market model together with the wind and solar models and simulate 1,000 different years, we obtain the next result that Lucky will explain further.
Thanks for that summary, Ernesto. And what we have here on this slide is essentially a distribution of prices. So as Ernesto stepped out, the simulation tool is based on the best available evidence to model solar and wind production variation independently, and also market price variation. And then we can take those inputs and model a specific renewable strategy for a given customer based on their actual load profile. And then the key outputs are what is the annual price paid for electricity on a dollars per megawatt hour basis. And the types of distributions that we've seen so far when modeling 100% renewable energy strategy are very encouraging in terms of how tight the price distribution is. Typically, the variance from expected price across the year is within 10% plus or minus, which compares quite favorably when you're looking at, for example, the fixed price contracting market, which is appreciated by more than 50% in most states in the last 12 months. The other feature was that based on the typical contract prices that we have access to for renewables, even the outlier high prices across the year were significantly below current fixed price contract rates in the market. So, really good supporting evidence that can help guide customer decision making compared to a sort of more traditional energy strategy. Now, just to step through the type of scenario where this could be used in practice, we wanted to just walk through a stepped example that Ernesto used for his report. So the typical type of engagement that we have with clients when we're talking about renewable energies is often the customer is coming to us where they've got a desire to pursue this strategy before we've actually started speaking to them. Often this is to do with environmental or social reasons, community engagement. Partly it's because of just broader sustainability objectives of the firm. So we're looking at this as an example of an operations manager of a business that's involved in continuous manufacturing, and they're wanting to pursue a 100% renewable energy strategy. And essentially we've been engaged to try and find out the optimum way for them to achieve that goal. So using the simulation tool, we analysed their load profile, and we compared and contrasted 3 different contracting strategies. One was to contract 100% of their load using solar. Another was to contract 100% of their load using wind. And then finally, we looked at a hybrid shape, which was best matched to their load profile. And for this specific example, it was predominantly wind. I think 75% wind and about 25% solar provided the best match. And that created a scenario where their load and generation was matched more than 70% of the time. And looking at the distribution of price outcomes, starting with solar, we can see that as expected, the variation in price outcomes across the year is much higher because of the fact that there was such poor alignment between the load shape and the solar generation shape. Moving along to wind, which was a much better fit for their flat load profile, we can see that the level of price variation is much lower. But the superior outcome, if the customer is most interested in minimizing price variation, is to actually blend solar and wind together. They get the benefit of mitigating the production risk by having access to 2 different technologies, and also just getting a tighter fit for the load shape as well. So yeah, really good supporting evidence to help drive better decision making for corporate energy buyers. So just summarising the ways that this type of analysis can help enhance decision making for the firm. It can give them better visibility over the way to access lower cost energy using renewables. It can give customers insight into the best strategy that's going to minimise price variation over the longer term. And I think that's a really important feature of renewables is the tenor. Typically, fixed rate contracts or the hedge market in Australia for energy only goes out 3 to 4 years. But renewable energy gives businesses the opportunity to contract, 5 years or more, giving you, a level of price certainty, which can be really helpful for businesses that need to make decisions about capital investment and so forth. And then finally, and really importantly, is helping to connect with renewables in a way that actually supports new energy development. As Sarah mentioned before, Flow Power has actually written 450 megawatts of offtake agreements around Australia. These are projects in various stages. Some of them are operational, some of them are near completion, some of them are still under development. And the offtakes that we write are really important to helping these projects get up off the ground, become real, and provide new supply into the Australian market, which benefits the market as a whole.
Okay, I found this on the web.
So that concludes the formal part of the presentation. We'll now start working through some of the questions that have come. Maybe first off, I might hand this one over to you, Sarah.
Certainly.
Oh, sorry, just quickly, I'll just mention that we have got some questions coming through now, but if there are any other specific questions, please send them through. First off, Sarah, what happens when there is no renewable generation?
Well, firstly, there's a couple of angles to this question. The first being, it's important to note that a PPA or VGA is a financial product, and therefore, when the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow, there's no effect on the supply of your energy. You'll still be able to use electricity like you always would be able to. During these times, you would be exposed to the spot market prices, but the benefit of a VGA is that there are protections built into these contracts that Flow Power have previously negotiated, and we pass these through to our customers, and they can benefit from these protections, which include things like a minimum generation guarantee, which can provide some comfort around the annual generation that you'll receive.
Thanks, Sarah. Next question here we have is, why have costs increased so much? And I'm going to take that to mean just the general cost for energy in the Australian market, which is an excellent question and something we talk about with all of our customers. Going back to the start of Sarah's slide, I guess the key driver is really the withdrawal of supply. So Hazelwood was a real trigger for prices to really spike in Australia, because Hazelwood was a really large brown coal-fired power station in Victoria, and it closed it with really short notice. I think it was less than 6 months. Obviously, replacing supply and building new power stations is something that takes a long time. There's a lot of renewable generation that's being developed in Australia right now. I think, as Sarah mentioned, over 7.5 gigawatts, but that can't go from start to finish in 6 months' time. So we're really in a bit of a pinch point in the market right now. Significant supply that's been taken out, and while there is new supply coming online, there's a lead time for that. And then, as mentioned as well, gas prices are really significant. Gas generation is only a small percentage of total generation in Australia, but it actually sets the price in the wholesale market a lot of the time. And gas prices have, I think, tripled or quadrupled in the last few years, and that all drives, unfortunately, a high price for electricity. Next question here we have is why did we run this model? So I might get Ernesto to talk to this as well, but maybe just more at a higher level. We do see simulation tools like this are really important in the energy industry, because there is uncertainty, and it's a really helpful way to help understand uncertainty and guide better financial decision making. It's a really common way of analysing the economics of supply projects, particularly renewables, whether it's a large on-site project or potentially large-scale renewables, to actually model variation in production versus variation in the market, and what that means in terms of revenues for a generator. So yeah, the idea was to extend on that type of analysis and integrate it with a customer who's got an exposure to buy energy from the same market as well, specifically our VGA product, so that we could actually understand how all of those factors influence each other and drive an actual cost outcome for the customer.
Yes, definitely. And I think the important part of doing this in a stochastic way is that you get the whole picture. You get your expected value, but you also get your standard deviation or the distribution of the prices, which is very valuable for decision makers.
Thanks, Ernesto. I just saw a brief follow-up question, which I might address now, just about why gas sets the price. Essentially, what's happening in real time with the wholesale market is generators are bidding to supply, and they can nominate the price that they will supply energy for, and the market operator is procuring energy from those generators at the least cost. So they'll essentially move through from lowest bids to highest bids until they've got enough generation to meet demand in the national electricity market. And the most expensive unit of energy that they have to purchase essentially sets the market clearing price. So because gas has got higher fuel costs per megawatt hour produced than coal, even though gas doesn't account for a large share of generation, it has a significant influence on prices for the market. So a really good question just came through about what happens if the price of renewables drops dramatically during the 10-year contract, and whether there's room for negotiating the price. Renewable energy offtake prices are largely driven by the capital cost of investment. Obviously, there's no fuel costs for solar and wind, and the operations and maintenance costs are fairly low compared to traditional thermal plants. So largely the cost of producing electricity from wind and solar farms offsite is the cost of capital to develop these projects. Another important feature, I guess, of the landscape in Australia is that largely the owners of these solar and wind farms are not traditional market participants. A lot of them are infrastructure investors, pension funds, organizations that are more interested in stable returns over a long period of time, rather than trying to get huge profits with variation in the short term. And what that drives is a price for contracting energy, that's very reflective of repaying capital over, say, a 20-year horizon. And we actually do see that because the PPA prices do vary from state to state where we've written offtakes, but they don't vary by anywhere near as much as market prices vary. So what that means in terms of contracting over a longer period of time, yes, prices could fall over the next 10 years. If technology significantly improves from where it is now, that would be a factor. But probably a more significant factor is what is the cost of capital. And we are at a point right now where cost of capital is about as low as it's ever been. That's both the cost of debt and the cost of equity. But these are all the factors that need to be weighed up when a business is making the decision to contract renewable energy. There is a risk that those prices for contracting energy could fall, but there are other reasons why they may stabilize as well. So it's really important to look at all of these factors when you're making the decision to contract over a longer period of time. The one other point I'd make about that is that the opportunity to I guess, get a financial benefit from renewable energy contracting is very strong right now because of the high wholesale prices that you'd be avoiding by contracting under a model like ours. So if wholesale prices are expected to fall in the next few years, which might mean that the savings are more modest in, say, 3 years time than they are right now. So yes, there's a chance that if you wait, you may be able to get access to a lower offtake agreement in a few years' time, but that's offset by a missed potential opportunity because of the level of savings that can be generated by contracting renewables in today's market where wholesale prices are really high. Had another really good question that came in talking about how this arrangement could change if the projects expand and include batteries, and will the customers get the benefit of firm renewables? That's a really good question. The contracts that we have are based on actual production from these plants, so it is variable in terms of it's what is actually produced is actually procured by ourselves and our customers. We actually see a really interesting opportunity to include batteries behind the meter and combine that with renewable energy contracted off-site, because then customers actually get access to the full value stack in terms of being able to optimize their network costs, still do some of the wholesale arbitrage, which is I think what's being talked about in terms of firming the renewables. But doing that in a way that is really complementary to a renewable energy strategy. For specific projects that may put batteries on site, at the moment, our awareness is that that's mainly around optimizing revenues at the generator level rather than turning it into a product at the customer level. So, I guess as a general point, we see this as being very complementary to batteries. But it doesn't actually necessarily need to be batteries that are located on site with the wind and solar farms.
Here's an interesting question. With PPAs, there seems to be the option to negotiate volume at production or consumption side. Which one have you negotiated? We negotiate at the regional reference node. This means that you're subject to, as a customer, you're subject to volume variation due to MLF, but your price is set per megawatt hour. So as we spoke to before, there are some protections around volume risk, but we size the load to a P50 expectation of generation for that asset.
There is a couple of questions that have come through around specific prices. We can't really go into that level of detail on the call, but I would just say as a general point that if anyone is interested in talking through in more detail what options are out there, very happy to do that. Long run marginal costs specifically, I guess that's more of a consideration for the project itself, but it's obviously going to have a very close relationship with the offtake prices that are available, and then what options customers would have. They do vary from project to project, what stage of development they're at, whether they're operational or not, what fuel, what state, and obviously contract length as well is really important. We do have options from 5 through to 10 years for essentially all of our projects, and the best value is achieved by going out to a longer term. There's a question here about how PPAs differ by region, and I might start off, but I might hand over to Sarah, who spends a lot more time negotiating PPAs than I do. But I guess as a general principle, the core mechanics of a power purchase agreement, or the agreements that Flow Power have entered into, are generally the same. We are contracting, energy that is produced for a fixed price, so it's essentially a variable volume fixed price contract, and then these are complex agreements. There's a lot of site specific and resource specific factors to consider, and I guess one of the key benefits of going down this model rather than developing your own projects on site is that the contracts actually give you a lot of commercial protections. For example, if generation's not above a minimum agreed level, the project actually has to compensate ourselves and our customers for that. Other severe performance problems, there's ways to actually get made whole for those situations. So there's going to be site specific and project specific considerations, but we've really tried to get to a reasonably uniform level in terms of what the cash flows and the commercial benefits look like, because of the fact that we've simplified the contract from a customer's perspective to turn it into a schedule that bolts onto your retail contract. And that's where the product is actually very uniform. So regardless of which state our customer is accessing this product through, the pricing mechanics and how it offsets your energy charges on your bill is actually uniform from state to state. Yeah, I don't know, Sarah, have you got any other comments on that?
I was just going to say, in terms of the difference of per state, obviously you're comparing against a different market price in each state. Therefore, we match our customers' load in that state to a VGA in that state, to eliminate any arbitrage or market risk, or try and keep it to a minimum. Obviously, there are some other factors in terms of scarcity of projects. For instance, sometimes there are sort of government laws passed, for instance, in Queensland, which have made particularly projects in that state slower to market, and it made it more challenging. So yeah, there are obviously state to state differences, but the general purpose is the same.
Yeah, and another really good question that's come through here is around what size load is best for a PPA. So Sarah made a comment at the start of the presentation comparing a financial PPA, which would be direct between a corporate and a project, and our model. And one of the reasons that we developed this model is that we wanted to be able to connect all of our customers with the opportunity, not just the really large ones that have got the resources and the capacity and the funds to be able to go through a direct contracting process, sorry. So to go through that bespoke negotiating process directly with the project, it's going to be a significant investment of time, human capital, and also just expenses on the contracting side. And there's also the issue of information asymmetry. If you have never gone through a process like that before, you're going to need a lot of help. Otherwise, there's a high risk that you're not going to negotiate a contract that works. So really, unless you're a fairly large customer with a big load, a financial PPA is not really going to be an opportunity for you, because the generators are not going to be interested in signing small offtakes. They want to sign fairly large agreements. So our model means that any customer who meets the wholesale customer test can contract renewable energy in this way. So really, I think probably customers using anything from 1 gigawatt hour a year or more can actually access this opportunity. Probably the other thing that's worth mentioning is that not just the size, but the shape. Having access to wind and solar means that we can adjust those contract levels to get a really good match for lots of different load profiles, whether it's more peaky, with high consumption during daytime hours, or more of a flat load for a continuous manufacturer.
I think it's important also to note that as an aggregator, we have the ability to negotiate on price, and even if you could go direct to a generator as a smaller customer, you wouldn't receive the same prices that we do.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And also just a fundamental one, just to make sure that we're clear that there are some sort of like green power type products out there in the retail market, which are supported by offsets or certificates. But this is very much a product where we are connecting customers directly through to specific projects. Some of our projects are named and they're out there in the public domain. Really pleased with the Sydney Opera House announcement just recently, which is a flow power VGA that connected them with the Sapphire wind farm and the Bowman solar farm in New South Wales. But there is absolutely, even the projects that are not in the public domain, when we get into contract negotiations with customers, they get full visibility over where those projects are, and we help them understand the performance, why we've signed contracts with them, and the rationale for that opportunity from a customer's perspective.
Okay, so last question, who should we contact to discuss PPAs from solar farms? You can give us a call at any time. We'd be happy to discuss. And we have a range of solar projects available in all states around the NEM, as well as wind.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more question. Someone just mentioned that they missed the beginning of the webinar and they were looking for a summary of the research. You will be able to access a recording and also a YouTube video, which has got the slides that we presented. And we are also thinking about potentially another way that we might be able to present the research as well. But yes, you'll absolutely be able to get access to the slides through YouTube, which includes some summary of the model. So that brings us to a stop. Thanks everybody for listening in. It's actually been a really well attended webinar, and some excellent questions that have come through. So thanks again for your attention and attendance. Anyone who would like to discuss this further, please reach out. We would love to talk through different options that you'd have to connect with renewable energy in Australia.
Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.